An on-the-ground report on the situation in Iraq leaked to the New York Times, and the picture that's painted of the current situation on the ground is incredibly bleak. Now, remember, originally Obama sent 300 Green Berets over there, and then he slowly upped the number of troops when he thought no one was looking. There were like a grand total of 3 articles online that mentioned he was upping the number of troops. And they always give, really interesting rationalizations as to why they're doing it and what the troops are for. They're like, no, actually, these troops aren't going to actually fight. What they're going to do is they're going to train people on the ground, and they're going to assist in intelligence gathering, and yada, yada, yada. And, look, maybe that's partially true, but let's face it. It's not like these troops are not going to engage in combat. It's not, what are they going to do? Just whisper in the ear of somebody who's a member of the Iraqi army and say, all right, guys, this is how you pull the trigger. You see that little thing right there? Pull back on it. No, that's not going to happen. They're going to be more involved than the government is letting on. So, with knowing that, here's what we learned today. Quote, only half of Iraq's security forces are capable of actually fighting back against the insurgence of militants in the country. The findings describe units that have been heavily infiltrated, either by informants of the invading Sunni militias, so ISIS, or Shiite groups that were trained in Iran and had previously fought against American troops in Iraq. This could pose great danger to hundreds of American advisors sent to Iraq. This is one of those situations where I wish I was wrong and I wish I couldn't do an obnoxious I told you so right now. But I told you so. I mean, what were we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to intervene? This is the problem. On what side are we going to intervene? Either we intervene on the side of the Iranian government and the Shiite leaders in Iraq, so the Maliki government, and by the way, also on their side would be Russia and Syria, right? Or we get involved and what do we help ISIS and the Sunni jihadists? By the way, other Sunni jihadist groups, that would be Al-Qaeda. So what are we going to do? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to go in and help the mullahs in Iran, or we go in and we help the ISIS jihadist militants. I'm not a genius or anything, but I think it's pretty easy to determine that neither side of this battle is a side that the United States of America is necessarily rooting for. And then also I find it hilarious, as we mentioned ad nauseum a month or so ago, that the same people that were crying for intervention in Syria to fight the Assad government, now that group of people is crying for intervention in Iraq to fight ISIS. Yeah, but wait a second. If you wanted to go into Syria to fight Assad, you would not have been fighting ISIS. If you had gone into Syria to fight ISIS, you would have been fighting on the side of Assad. So the way that this situation has broken down in terms of U.S. intervention is it shows how, honestly, comical our foreign policy has gotten. This reminds me a lot of back in the 1980s when the Reagan government would end up funding the Mujahideen, which is the army of God, and then later, of course, the Mujahideen broke up into the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. We funded them. We gave them weapons. Now, why did we do that? Because at the time, they were fighting the Soviet Union, and we hated communism so much that we abided by the old mindset of our enemy is our friend, so we funded these people who were, essentially jihadists. And then later on, they ended up fighting us with the weapons that we gave them, as always happens with U.S. foreign policy. So now we get more involved, and in all seriousness, we're simply putting in danger, more than anybody could have predicted, the lives of the American military men who have gone over there. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm a non-interventionist, as everybody who listens to the show knows. The only time I really think it's justified to use the American military is if it's in response to an imminent threat of attack against us. So in other words, the standard of self-defense, that radical idea that only an overwhelming majority of the American people agree with me on. But if you're going to go into Iraq and if you're not going to be an interventionist, At least do the right kind of intervention and the smart kind of intervention. You don't send a few hundred U.S. troops on the ground to possibly get killed by either side, either the side they're trying to train or the people that were fighting in ISIS, right? You don't do that. If you do any intervention, you send a fleet of fucking drones and you pop out the ISIS militants in a week. Okay? We know where they are. It's not a secret. We don't need any further intelligence gathering to figure out where the ISIS people are. It's pretty right in front of our fucking faces. They took Mosul, and then they're continuing marching on to Baghdad. There was a report recently that they took over a chemical weapons facility. Okay, now it's getting fucking scary. Again, I'm not in favor of intervention, and those same articles point out that these chemical weapons, they're not capable of being used, and if anything, the people who would try to use them would immediately kill themselves, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing, they don't know how to use them, right? So I'm not in favor of intervention, but if you were going to do intervention, why not just do a quick drone campaign, man? What the fuck is wrong with us? We're going to send in a couple hundred American Green Berets and say, all right, train the people who also want to kill you to fight the other people who want to kill you. What is this? And then I love the other stupid idea from John Kerry and President Obama. The idea of, well, how about we try to get the Shiite government to not be only Shiite anymore, because, of course, Iraq is a majority Sunni country. And how about instead we bring in a couple Sunnis? That's a smart idea. Except here's the problem with that line of thinking. If you believe that bringing a couple moderate Sunnis into the Iraqi government is going to appease the most extreme version of Sunni jihadists, man, you have something else coming. Believe me, ISIS, they're not interested in moderate Sunnis either. They have no interest. In fact, they were crucifying moderate Sunnis not that long ago in Syria. Literally crucifying them. And they were charged with the crime of being too moderate. So what, bringing a couple moderate Sunnis into the Iraqi government is going to make these ISIS jihadists go, well, we did want to set up an Islamic State, and in fact, they already declared an Islamist state, right? But now we're going to back off because a couple moderate Sunnis have now gone into the Shiite-dominated Maliki government. The way that the U.S. government right now is handling foreign policy is a joke.